Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Yay. And today we are doing a continuation from our last episode talking about impact, blame, and intention. So the impact that behaviors have had on us, the effect that behaviors have had on our body, and the difference between blaming people for those and noticing what their intention might have been, just creating some space between all of these. Today we're going to be talking specifically about friend and loved ones relationships when it comes to this kind of stuff. Next episode, we're going to talk about parents, parental guilt and parental blame. But this time, the episode is for all the other loved ones and the impact that we're experiencing. Before we get started, though, G's going to lead us through a self-connection exercise.
Okay. So I really like this one. And I also noticed I say that to probably all of them. I use every one that we share. And they all have, there's like little, not pets, but did you ever collect those little, I don't know, those like
Tamagotchis?
things like that? I never had one, but that's how it feels. They're all like little babies of mine.
Babies.
Yeah, that I use in different scenarios. And so I feel it feels special to share them with you.
Oh, sweet.
This one is one that is, I think I do this often when I'm outside or when I have a window to look out. So if you are able to look out the window or be outside, this was a great one to practice. You could also practice it in your house. I'm not sure how that would go, but it could be interesting.
Fruit flies. That's how. If there's
Perfect season. Fruit flies. Perfect. Great. Yes. Okay. And depending on how many animals, pets, people, maybe machines you have in your house, that would make it easier. People are probably wondering, like, what kind of practice is
a slink.
insects?
Lost a slink. You don't. Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to find your anchoring point, whatever that is for you, whatever that means for you. So I really like to have multiple anchor points. So right now, one of my anchor points is my feet on the floor. Another one is my butt on the ottoman. And today I have an extra one, which is like I was stretching my arms and really pushing with my palms into my thighs. So I feel 3 anchor points right now. You can choose whether you want one or more. We're going to first find something to look at that is moving. Whatever that means. It could be the fruit fly or the slinky. But in my case, I see some leaves blowing in the wind. And so look at whatever is moving and be there for a full breath. All that means is just pause there and notice your body taking its natural inhale and exhale. And now you're going to find something to look at that is still, that's not moving. And again, be there for a full breath. Look at the thing. I feel my hands on my legs. You might feel a different body connection. And then we're going to go and look for something else that is moving, something else that is not still. I'm going to stand up and see what else I can see. I just saw a bird fly. So I'm looking at the bird, noticing my breath. And let's go with another thing that's still. Look at it, notice your breath. I feel my feet on the floor. And let's go again. I want to go one more round. Find something that's moving. I see swimming pool and the water is moving. Notice your breath. And then we'll close off with one last thing that is not moving. And be there for a full breath. And then sit in whatever way feels good, or stand or walk or run. I hear that we've been going along with people's runs. Did you know that, Stephanie?
Oh, that's good. Good for them. Lovely. I noticed something during that exercise. So where I am currently is very warm and still, and there are no bugs in this room. So the only thing that's actually moving is the reflection of heat waves on a line. So I noticed that the feeling of nothing moving makes me feel a bit insane and trapped. I also noticed my power to make something move. I blew on the box of tissues and the Kleenex moved.
All of a sudden, something's moving.
Right? And for the third round, I heard movement. So in the abs, and that gave me the expansive feeling that the prison of no movement I was feeling, but I could hear cicadas in the trees and I'm aware of their movement. So that felt good.
That's so neat. And this is such a reminder that these practices aren't meant to make us feel better. They might make you feel better, but they're meant to have you take a moment and be intentional and connect with yourself and notice what happens. Right? Notice what feels good, what doesn't. How could you create a circumstance or situation that feels better if it's needed? Yeah. I like bringing in stillness and movement because I like that to help us practice noticing duality, because life is about duality, and duality is important. It's necessary. You can't have everything in this world that's stagnant and doesn't move. And you can't have everything moving all at once.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So last episode, we were talking about the difference between types of impact on us, people's intentions. And when we were discussing what we wanted to say about these things, I mean, there were so many things, but we talked about parents and we talked about friends and we talked about the effect of abandonment wounds on our behaviors, on our friends' behaviors, on our worldviews and assumptions. So that's what we're going to get into mostly in this episode.
Right.
And the example I want to give.
Can I pause you before you share example? Because I want to elaborate on abandonment wound. You and I, like, that's very familiar language. But I remember the first time I heard it, like in my therapist's office. And I was like, I've never been abandoned.
Right.
Like, I've never left on the side of the road. I don't know what you mean.
That's the exact thing I thought. Side of the road, left on the side of the road.
And I remember thinking, this lady's a kook. She thinks they've been abandoned. And so what we're talking about here is that sense throughout your life, often beginning in childhood, where you weren't fully met in your emotional experience, in your physical experience, like you weren't really held. And I like using the terms be with. Was someone able on a consistent basis to be with you, not just physically, but like welcome you with acceptance and warmth in all of your being, in all of your feelings? Like all your feelings are allowed. Your needs matter. How you experience things is valid. Did you have a consistent experience of that? So it's not like perfect 100% of the time, but overall, would you describe your growing up life as, yes, I had at least one main adult in my life who gave me that feeling experience of all of me is welcome?
Yeah.
And when we haven't had that experience, then, like one of the terms that people can use to describe that is the abandonment wound.
Yeah. I think all of us, or, 99% of us, will have abandonment wounds about emotions, about big feelings. And we could have the most attentive parent in the world who's very open to all of our feelings and holding us in that. But they also are going to have the realities of day-to-day existence, having to go to work, whatever it is. And at some point, we will have felt that our feelings weren't being held. And that will manifest in some sort of, it's an abandonment wound that will manifest in some way or other.
Yeah. And like also the human being is wired to make things mean something, to make sense of our world and our life. I remember talking to a client years ago, and we were talking about this, of how these woundings can occur even when so many needs are met on a consistent basis. Um, she said, when I was young, my mother went to the hospital to give birth to twins.
Abandonment.
She didn't bring back a girl twin. So she interpreted that as, my mother doesn't care about me and what I want.
Oh,
Because I had wanted a sister.
right.
And, as an adult, she could laugh about it, but she's like, isn't that wild what our minds make things mean?
Yeah.
Right. And her mother would have never known that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. That
Yeah.
will absolutely manifest in some way today. And that, we probably just won't even be aware of. It's just these little things that are happening internally.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
And not to put like fear into parents, I'm a parent. I know what it's like to worry about your children and wonder if you're messing them up. We're just going for, I think they say 70% of the time, 70% of the time, can you be responsive, in a warm way? And the other 30% of the time, like, can you make repairs if it doesn't work out?
Yeah. So much of this is just the human reality of relying on other people. It's pretty rare that we would go, oh, I don't feel abandoned because the universe has my back. I know the earth will provide me with everything that I need. Therefore, I can feel safe and unabandoned, right? We want comfort. We want love, touch, connection. We want them all in certain ways that come differently from all sorts of people. There's so much in there to explore for ourselves personally.
Yes. So I think we gave a good basic explanation of what we mean when we say abandonment wound. And now I want to hear your story.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to illustrate abandonment wound, I think. And I too was not left on the side of the road. Okay, so this happened a couple of weeks ago when you were there, and thank heavens you were there because you gave me so much perspective in that moment. We had just returned from one of our secret retreats that we go on, and my housemate had had friends over that weekend, and we were just sort of reconnecting. We were all sort of in the kitchen, and she said, "Oh, I cleaned your bathroom," and my immediate response was, "Why?" And you said, "She was being nice." And my brain exploded. So no part of me. So what I aspire to is when somebody says, "Hey, I did a nice thing," I can just go, "Wow, thank you. That's so nice." But instead, all of the not good enough and I've done something wrong parts come up. And I just was not aware of it at all. Like my brain went crazy. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to recognize these parts as they come up, right? So there's a lot of stories that the meaning maker made in that instant.
Yeah.
The first was that my bathroom was not clean enough because, something to do with not good enough, should have been better, wasn't good enough. In the past, there would not have been, I just did this as a nice thing. It would have been, I did this because you didn't do it and you should have, sort of thing.
So that's your experience if someone did something for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There wasn't just favors for love and joy,
Okay.
Wow. and also the saying of it, like, oh, I'm telling you I did a nice thing because I want some kind of a response from you or credit or something. Like, all of this is wrapped up in there. My brain also went to all the, well, why did you clean my shit? Why didn't you clean your own shit? What about all this other messy shit over here? Like, just blame, shame, festival. And then the why, like, what was the meeting maker was trying to make sense of it. I was like, oh, well, maybe you did it not because I was bad and wrong. Maybe you had friends over, or you needed something in there or something, like reasons,
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, all of these bajillion things that happened in my brain, not a single one of them was, oh, that's nice, thank you.
And that happened so fast because I remember you saying why. And I remember thinking, that's an interesting response. And then it came so fast. Like, it wasn't like you were pondering it for 10 minutes.
No, very direct. And I don't mince words or waste any time. Why? And honestly, if you had not been there with your, in no way were you shaming or anything. Like, you just burst out with this because she was being nice. It would not have occurred to me. I'm so grateful that you were there. So I feel like that was almost a bit catalyst-like in our understanding of each other and my understanding of myself, really. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't said that. Like, I think I just would have gone down a bafflement hole and a small shame spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And only mystery would have remained around that interaction, It's
so wild how, two people, like, there were three of us there, and we both experienced hearing it, and we have such different responses to it. Obviously, it's different in that it was spoken to you and not me. So that in itself, it makes it different. Didn't stir up the same things in me. But it was just really neat to notice, because my immediate thought, I remember hearing her say that, and I was like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, right? It's so nice. Thank you. I get to feel that way because you pointed out that that's the way I could be feeling, That's the space I got to occupy in that moment.
Yeah.
I have another small example, and this is just humorous to me now and really also kind of sad. I didn't date for like the first, I think I started dating people when I was 35. I was just a festival of confusing relationships before that. So quite a learning curve. And sadly, at this point in my life, I was not yet accustomed to gentlemen. I was accustomed to a different variety of man.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on a date with what turned out was a gentleman, but I didn't even know what that looked like at the time. So we went to drive somewhere, and it was my car. I was going to drive. And he came around to open my door for me. And again, instead of just being like, oh, what a nice thing, thank you, I was like, oh, you're not driving my car. And that was a relatively new, like in the 5 years previous, I'd been in a relationship with a guy who would have smashed himself into the driver's seat and, pushed in ways that at the time I didn't realize were pushing. So my new assumption was, nothing makes sense. I need to defend myself. This man isn't just opening a door. He's trying to drive my car, and we barely even met, What the hell, sir? Like, oh, wow. And I could at least recognize that. And of course, because I'd said it out loud, that always helps us learn when we say these things out loud. Like, you're not driving my car. And it's like, I know. I'm opening the door for you. Like, thank you. A different type of person might have been like, yeah, I'm not driving your car. Like, what the hell? And then it could have turned into an all-out brawl on the street.
Amazing. I love those moments. I love those moments where we're confronted with seeing what we do and noticing, oh, this is this thing that I do, and it happens so fast.
Yeah, totally. So the impact that these two instances had on me had nothing at all to do with the intention of the people that I was in relationship with in those moments.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because would you have gone back to your housemate and said, why would you say that to me? Why would you clean my thing? Because now I feel terrible about myself, and like I didn't clean well enough. Like, because that was your the impact, right? The shame that you felt.
Yeah, a shame slash blame thing. Yeah. That's almost too detailed and complicated to like iron out in a few sentences. But because it's in my awareness, we'll talk about it. If it had not been in my awareness, I don't know what would happen.
Well, what's interesting is like you would have made that mean something, and you would have behaved. Well, you did. You said, can you say it again? What you said?
Why?
And it was with that tone and that face too. And I could just imagine for your housemate hearing you say that in response to that, and your tone and your facial expression, what then she could have made it mean.
Yeah.
And gone to all sorts of places, and then would have responded in her own protective ways.
For sure.
And then you would have taken that behavior and made it mean a whole bunch of things. And here we go spiraling about. And this is why it's so important to notice what we make things mean, because it impacts how we show up. And then how we show up becomes the next thing for the other person to make it mean all sorts of things. Right? So I'm curious, you've had this now realization for yourself of like what you made it mean, where that maybe stemmed from in your past. Is that something you shared with your housemate at some point, or will you share that with her at some point?
Yeah, definitely will. Yeah. As I recall, over the course of like when you said she was being nice, I was like, oh, right. Thank you. I did get the thank you out and connected with that in the moment, but talking about everything that came up, we haven't done yet. No. And yeah, I will make a point of doing that for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Hey.
And it's so interesting because I can see when someone does something well-intentioned, and then you get sort of the snarky response. Like for me, if that were me, I'd be like, well, F you then. I'm not going to do that again. Right? I'm not going to help you out anymore.
Yeah.
And so unfortunate, because then it's sort of left at that. Instead of this, when you have that willingness to share with humility and speak to her at some point and let her know, it can clear that up.
Yeah.
And clear that space, right, in between you.
So I think this is kind of what we wanted to get to in the conversation, is the times when that can't clear the space between you because an abandonment wound is gaping and raw and cannot be corrected with all the loving intention in the world.
Yeah.
I know we have some personal examples of people in our lives who, maybe I'll put it this way, they're only primed to receive love in a specific way. And if love looks any different than that, or attention and energy looks any different than that, it's not going to be received as love. It's going to be received as rejection.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a few, not a lot of friendships with this flavor, but a few over the years where if I didn't respond fast enough, if I didn't initiate enough connection time, then it would get all taken very seriously and personally. And then there would be this weird vibe and energy in our space. And it's been interesting navigating that with people. And also feeling the difference of when those abandonment wounds don't play so front and center, and with people who don't take those things so personally and make it mean something terrible about themselves or me or the friendship. And I've also been on the other side of it. I remember when my abandonment wounds, without me realizing I had any because I had never been left on the side of the road, when people wouldn't respond to me promptly or in a certain way, I would make that personal. And I would, at the very least in my mind, also make them wrong. So isn't that interesting? Because you said that too in your situation. It was like a mix of shaming of yourself, but also blaming the other person.
Yeah.
And that's what I noticed too, is shame myself, and that I'm not good enough, but also blame the other person of you're a jerk.
Yeah.
And not a very
Those are
good
the
friend.
tools. That's
Yeah.
the meaning makers.
That's the tool set.
Yeah, right? That's it. Meaning maker, adjourn.
Yeah. So I definitely remember being that person before also.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've shifted out of that, as I've seen that things are not personal, and as I've honored my boundaries and see that if I say no, it's not because the other person isn't worthy of my time or worthy of care. It's because I need this time to feel okay. Then when other people say no to me, I don't take it personally. I'm like, oh, good for you. Take care of what you need to take care of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Think of how quickly the meaning maker turns on when you're looking to receive a text message response from somebody, for example, especially somebody that you're dating, that you're interested in. Maybe it's somebody who has historically been very quick to respond and suddenly they're not responding. You're going to make it mean a million things, and you're going to start protecting yourself via blame and also disrespecting yourself via shame. You can do all these things all at once.
Yeah.
And that's creating its own set of impact on you.
Yeah. I used to do that a lot. Like, I realized one of my protective mechanisms was to always scan for patterns of behavior. So I would notice a shift in behavior very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I would immediately make that mean all sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Your brain occupying itself. This makes a lot of sense. So if you guys are listening to this and it is resonating with you, a small tool that you can employ right now is noticing when your brain is making meaning or looking for patterns or whatever it is that it's designed to do, and shift that activity into noticing what's happening in your body. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So one that I like, because I'm for the practical and the concrete. So I really like that sentence stem that we practiced with before. Like, right now, a thought that I have is, right now, I'm making this mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just fill out the sentence. And then I'd place a hand on my body and just be there for a breath. And I needed to practice catching those moments first before you can ever switch to more helpful meanings to give things. You have to first catch that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember making it like a game, sort of like, oh, there it is again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just giving it a voice and just saying out loud. And I found that as I got more comfortable and skilled in saying out loud the meaning I was making in that moment or a thought that I had in that moment, it also helped me share more of myself with other people because I could speak to them from that place. Like, oh, I'm making this mean this right now. Or a story I'm telling myself right now is this.
Mm-hmm.
Or a thought that I have about this right now is this. Can I check that with you? Yeah. That is so much more inviting for someone to meet you there than you're an ass.
Yeah. 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 They get to understand you and they get to feel you and they get to relate that to experiences they have in their own bodies. Mm-hmm. It's very helpful. And it's just a great cue for people to remember, oh, yeah, the meaning maker.
Right.
Go. I have the visual of a roller coaster at Disneyland called the Meaning Maker. And it just goes up and down and all around.
I don't even need to go on that ride. On it all the time.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. And again, the brain is designed, like this is a useful skill to have, a useful brain function to have, making meaning, making things make sense. We need to have that. And we also need to use it consciously as adults moving through the world in relationship with each other.
Yeah.
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 Is there anything else we want to say about this? I
There's
put a note about deeper truths. So that what's happening to us in the present is reminding us of something that happened to us in the past.
Yeah.
I feel like it's important to explore that, but not to get hung up on it. It's important to move those emotions. But there's some element in there when I'm thinking about friends with abandonment wounds who are stuck on this position of, I need X, Y, and Z to feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
There's some block there that's surely a blind spot, that I think we need to find some love and comfort in the existence of the blind spot, paired with encouragement of moving through it. When you've got
Yeah.
somebody who's on this position and unable or unwilling to let it go, that's really hard to deal with.
It's really hard to deal with because I want to extend compassion and love as much as I can. Right. And I know that these patterns of taking things personally, they originated because something not pleasant happened to us as kids. Right. So it's not because people want to be malicious as adults or difficult people. It came from a really innocent place and tender place. And so I want to have compassion. And if someone is working through healing their abandonment wounds, I want to be mindful of how I can be a friend who's considers that and does my best to be a thoughtful friend. And I think what I notice is sometimes I hit a limit. And I've had to ask myself, like, why am I hitting a limit? Why am I having a hard time tapping into compassion? And I think it's that other piece that you say there has to be both sides of a willingness to say, hey, I realize this is my old pattern. You know, I tend to take things personally and then I shame myself and I might blame you. And it's one thing to have self-awareness. And this is a hard lesson that I had to learn. People can have self-awareness and you can be really happy about that and grateful that they have awareness. And you can want to work with them in their healing and growth journey. But I notice for me, I need to see some change. I need to see some things shifting, because if every time I don't reply right away, I'm seen as the bad person and they see themselves as this unworthy friend, it gets tough. Like the energy of that is tough and it's tiring.
Well, it's one
So,
directional, right? Like we're
yeah,
talking, this is a relationship. We're in relationship with each other and each other's behaviors. And if one party is saying, no, things have to be a certain way, there's no room for a dynamic.
mhm. So I think what I've noticed is as a friend, um, I want to see that things are shifting. And to me, it doesn't matter how slow.
Mm-hmm.
Slow is okay. Baby step is okay. But it helps me to see that someone is taking ownership and responsibility of shifting their own pattern.
Yeah. And it's an embodied thing, right? I think all of this kind of work that we're doing and talking about is becoming pervasive in society. We all have this new set of collective language about self-connection, self-awareness, counseling type language. So it's really easy for us to intellectually know, this is a wound I have. And I'm working on it because I'm saying words about it all the time. I'm talking with people about it. I'm learning about it. But there's something about bringing this into your body and a willingness to release something that in itself is a huge blind spot for people. And it takes some magical function, either a sentence that you hear or something that you download internally. Some felt sense will shift. And in the absence of that having shifted, there's not going to be a lot of change. And that doesn't mean people are bad or wrong, but it is going to limit the amount of energy that people have to cope with whatever this blind spot is, for sure.
And I feel so sad. I feel so sad when people start pulling away from people who are really entrenched in the victim mentality, for example, right? Or that there's something wrong with me. And that carries a certain kind of energy into friendship. And then at some point, I always hear that these people who think that way about themselves and their friends, they then notice their friends pulling away and distancing. And it reaffirms for them that old story that I'm not worthy and people don't stick around and people don't want to be my friend. And I just feel so sad watching that happen. And, you know, my wish is for people to grow their capacity and grow their support to start noticing this pattern of belief about self and practicing little by little shifting out of seeing yourself through that lens. Because when we continue to see ourselves through that lens, we bring a certain energy into dynamics. And what I noticed happens is we might feel connected for a time with someone, but it's often because there's a trauma bond. And both people are sort of just giving to each other in that way that feels good, but it can't sustain itself often. If one person starts to heal their abandonment wounds and set more boundaries, then immediately that dynamic shifts. And unless the other person is also committed to shifting their old patterns, one person is going to be sitting there saying, and see, you're leaving me too. And it's not really about that. The other person doesn't necessarily want to leave the connection and the friendship. But when it's a certain energy repeatedly, it gets tiring, right? And I think I've noticed in myself as I worked on healing my abandonment wound and learning that it was okay to set boundaries and it's okay to honor what feels good in my body, I'm leaning more towards friendships that feel easier and cleaner and there's more flow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so much time and energy in the day. And so I'm drawn to those ones. And then I naturally pull away from ones where it's this repeated cycle over and over again. And it's tough because I can imagine being on that end, the other end, that doesn't feel good. And at the same time, like we can't make or force people to shift out of their old thinking and their old protective patterns.
Or to recognize our love, you know? If my love looks unrecognizable to you, that might just be the way it is, you know?
That's a big piece. If my love looks unrecognizable, right? Because we could be pouring so much love and holding so much love on for someone. But if it's unrecognizable, then it doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't get in. So I want us all to practice noticing, like, in what ways am I self-protecting still and not letting love really sink in, love and care.
And those are so many, those words are so hard to penetrate the body, you know? So if you're a person who's caught in one of these patterns and you might hear yourself saying like, I know you love me, I just am not feeling it. Or I know you care and it just doesn't seem like it. You might be a person stuck in one of those patterns, and I want to offer you to just keep going and connect with your body, and these things will shift. You're not bad or wrong for being trapped in a pattern.
No, not at all. And like I would, like right now, impulsively, I want to, and we can practice this together, which is to feel your anchoring point, whether that's your butt or your feet, and placing one hand behind your back and one hand on the front of your body. And notice how that feels. And if you find yourself having a hard time letting love and care sink in, I really encourage you to practice these simple body practices. until one day you notice that they offer you comfort. Because my wish for you is that you know what comfort and care feels like in your body. And slowly that's going to build the foundation for you to recognize comfort and care from people. Right? And I've been wondering for a while why this feels so good for me. I don't know if this feels good for you, this kind of holding. It feels good for me. And what I relate it to is when you're young and you're being held, you're carried as a baby, you're carried as a toddler. The front of your body is laying against the front of an adult, and their hand is on your back. So you have this feeling of containment, like you're held, right? So I'd encourage you to practice these things. And then I would also encourage you to use a prompt like this, a sign of care from so-and-so is, right? Practice this with the people around you. A sign of care is, a sign of love is, even if it doesn't feel like care or love, see if you can let yourself lean into looking for them. Because my sense is there are signs of love and care. And what I've noticed is when I'm working with people who are really stuck in this belief that people don't care about them, people don't love them, they don't matter, when we break things down and we just go on an adventure of looking for signs of care with different people in their life over the course of their life in different areas of their life. When they use this prompt, they're like, oh, there are signs of care. And then we also practice like saying it out loud. A sign of care from my boss was when, they asked me if I had time for this project or if I needed a break. And I'll have people practice saying that out loud and then connecting with body. And to like notice what happens in their body when they speak out loud the sign of care. And what I'll notice in people, and they'll notice in themselves, is this settling. Like, oh, that care is there. And oh, my body does want to settle when I recognize that there's a sign of care. And it might not be immediate. For some people, it's very quick. And for others, it's just with practice. Your body starts seeing that and feeling that, experiencing that as this is a sign of care and it's safe. It's safe to let down and see this as a sign of care.
So good.
It reminds me actually of the bathroom situation. That was a sign of care.
Yeah.
Right? But your old wiring labeled that as a sign of danger.
Yeah. In an instant.
Yeah.
Definitely. Amazing. Mm-hmm. This is more of the work we're going to be doing in our upcoming program called Priming the Body for Peace, which will be coming in the fall. We're going to be doing these bits of work together, priming our bodies to be able to feel these bits of love and health and safety that are all around us that we don't notice or haven't been able to connect with.
Because I was wired for stress. Yeah. So much stress in my body coursing through without me realizing it. Even though my head said, I want peace, because whose head would tell you I don't want peace?
Yeah.
But like the choices I made in my life, and like I wasn't making like these really glaringly, chaotic choices. And if you are, there's nothing wrong with that. But like it didn't seem obvious to me. That's my point. Like it didn't seem obvious that I was creating more stress and overwhelm. And it wasn't until I realized and learned how to feel peace in my body, and that was safe to feel peace in my body, that things really began to shift and shift fast.
Yes.
I remember thinking, oh, everyone meditates. Maybe that's how I'll get peace in my body. And I went to like a 6 or 8 week meditation course with the best of intentions. But the impact was that I laid on the mat and I just wanted to run out of the place. I was like, get me out of here. This feels so awful.
Yeah.
And I just sort of branded myself as I'm not meant for meditation. Not good at this stuff. Doesn't feel good. And what a shame, because I think there's a lot of gifts in it. But that was too far of a reach for me, laying on a mat for 20 minutes. in stillness. And so I found other ways, simple ways that gave me just enough for my brain to be occupied, but slowed it down more than it was usually primed for. And through that gentle way, I learned how to not just recognize peace in my body, I learned how to create peace in my body. I learned how to feel a desire for peace in my body, like from my body, not just my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm
Created in your
excited.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited for people to get to live life from that kind of place.
Yeah. Nobody's stuck in a pattern and feeling good about it, when they're aware that that's what's going on. You just don't have the tools to move out of the intellectualizing or the analyzing of the pattern and move out of that pattern of behavior in the body. Yeah. So yes, we're really excited about this program.
I was thinking, I go to a personal trainer because I know that I could do the exercises on my own, but right now in my life, it's not likely that I'll do it with that amount of consistency. And I love my trainers, and it's so encouraging to be able to work with them. And so the other day I was like, oh, this is like personal training for your emotional wellness.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sweet. I wanted to say one thing about that holding exercise that you had us do. Was that the closing practice, holding?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I had a roommate many years ago, and I'm sure I was complaining about something or desiring something. I wanted to be held in some way that I wasn't feeling held, and she, the same way you had the reaction about the bathroom, like it was something nice. She went, oh, like, don't you feel held by nature? Like, when I step out into the grass, I'm like, Mother Earth is holding me. The air is cradling my body. When I'm in a body of water, I'm being held and supported completely, It was a real attitude difference from what I was carrying at the time, I think that attitude and perspective can really shade all of our experiences in these ways.
Yeah. And like when you say that now, that sounds so lovely, like held by the earth and cradled by the air. And I think if you would have said that to me years ago, I'd been like, what the F are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Hokey crap. And now when you say it, I'm like, yeah, like, isn't that beautiful to also have that as an option? And I think for me, and I don't know if this is other people's path, but I can't feel held by the ground or cradled by the air if I can't even feel my body.
Yeah.
Right. And I had to learn first how to feel my body. And that sounds like really basic, but I definitely did not know how to do that.
It doesn't sound basic in any way. So many of us don't know how to do that. And one of the phrases we hear a lot, especially when it comes to dating and leaning back and leaning into ourselves, we hear this phrase, can you give it to yourself? If you're wanting something from somebody else, give it to yourself. That's not necessarily because you're needing the thing. It's so that your body can have the experience of feeling the thing, so that you can then know what it feels like, seek it in the world around you, notice those behaviors in other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I wanted to offer a little version of the holding on the back because, like, I also know, like, I've heard from people, like, I'm weirdly flexible. So putting my hand behind my back feels good. I don't know, maybe for other people it doesn't. If this holding of one hand behind your back, one hand on your front, and you can play with where on your front and where on your back gives you that feeling of I'm being held and it feels nice. But if it doesn't feel good to reach your hand behind your back, you can press up against the back of the chair, but just bring awareness to that support behind you. Or I also like leaning my back against the wall and feeling that I can rest up against the wall. And I feel that gentle hand on my heart, right? So play around with it.
Beautiful.
It's really about getting to know your own body and what feels like a yes and what feels like a no. And honoring that.
Yeah, and being intentional with the sensation of support. You're looking for the sensation of support. If you can pull that out of the air, great. Yeah.
Yeah. And for a lot of us, we don't know what that is. We don't know what support, what the sensation of support. I love that string of words together of, can you allow yourself to discover the sensation of support? And it might not be recognizable really in the beginning, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we're learning. Yeah. Yeah, especially as we don't know what support feels like. Like, that's a co-creative process. We get to decide what feels good. We get to notice what our body's response is. Oh, I'm excited. Okay, we got to sign off. We've been still talking. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
Nope.
Well, please like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share it with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.